So now that we've modeled and shaped our die using the physical geometry in order to carve out the pips, we've got a couple of things we need to do. First off, most of the time when the pips are carved out, they're still painted on the inside. We're going to add some texture to that so that way the pips have that color on the inside. The other thing we're going to do is create another D6, but the new D6 is only going to use texture to define where the pips are, including the illusion of having carved them out. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on the Create New Object tab. We're going to go to Extended Primitives and create ourselves another chamfer box. Just like the last one, we want our length, width, and height to be 10 and our fillet to be 0.4, because ultimately this is going to be the same box as the same die, just using a different method. I'm going to go ahead and position it at 0, 0, 0, and they're now both perfectly overlapping each other. So let's go ahead and turn that box off. Well, let's rename it first. This one is going to be Texture D6. We'll click on our first one. Okay, so with this cube selected, whoops, we are going to add an Edit Poly modifier to it. I'm going to do Polygon Selection. I'm just going to draw a little box right there, hold down Control, and draw a little box right there. And then again over at these two corners here. And what that should do is select everything but our pips. So then from there, if I scroll down on our modifier list and select Unwrap UVW, it's going to apply a UVW mapping just to the selected polygons. So I'm going to click Open UV Editor, and then go to Mapping, Normal Mapping, and then change it from front back to box. Hit OK, and you'll see all of our sides minus their pips are now selected and displayed right there. So now that I've done that, I'm going to add another Edit Poly modifier. Polygon Selection. And we've got a couple of different ways we can do this. Let's do this the fun way. I'm going to select right in the middle of that pip right there. I'm going to scroll down. I'm just going to hit Grow all the way up until you see the side highlighted as well. I'm going to click Alt, hold down Alt, click right there, click Grow again. I'm going to zoom in here. I think there's a couple of a couple of polygons not selected still. That looks to have everything. So I've got that one single pip selected. So now if I go to Edit Poly, no wait, I already have Edit Poly, sorry, Unwrap UVW, and then open UV Editor. There's that right there. For mapping, I'm just going to click Flatten Mapping, hit OK. That's not the one I want. Let's try, you know what? There's a much better way to do that. So Control Z. If I come down here, we can do a quick peel. Of course, none of those are working the way they should. There we go, that's the one I want. So it looks like LSCM, and then we should be good there. So I'm going to scale this down a bit. And then just position it right there for now. And I'm going to be doing the same thing for all the other pips as well. So then if I add another edit poly modifier, and remember you want to keep adding new edit poly modifiers, you're just creating a sequence of events right here. So polygon selection, let's do the 4. Click once inside there, hold down Control, click, click, and click. So then when I click grow a few times, eventually you see the side has been selected. Hold down Alt and click on that. Go again. It's just repetition of the process. So now, not quite all of them. Whoops. So that seems to have all the polygons for those 4 pips there. Unwrap UVW. Open UV Editor. And then once again, we're going to change it from Unfold to LSCM. Do our quick peel. There's our 4 pips right there. Scale them down. And I'm just going to drag them down to right there. And rinse and repeat. So edit poly. Come around to this side. Polygon selection. Click, click, holding down Control, and each time I click, we select all of those. Alternatively, what we can do is angle it like this, do a box selection like that, check to make sure none of the pips are selected there, hold down Alt, deselect these other sides, come around here, hold down Alt, deselect the extra faces. And then we just have that. Whichever method you choose for selecting the pips is up to you. Just understand that if there are other objects in the scene, other pips that are overlapping, it may cause a little bit of an issue, but it seems to be working for the moment. So once again, I'm going to add an unwrap UVW, open UV Editor, scroll down, change it from Unfold to LSCM, quick peel, and then there's those 6 right there. Scaling it down, oops, and moving it to the side here. Now I don't like the way that has moved that 1 pip up like that. I'm just going to place it right there. This right here, select by element. Anything that is not attached to something else currently on our UVW map is going to be able to be selected as a whole by having this little thing selected. Turn it off, and then you can start selecting the individual polygons again. All right. And yes, there is a reason I'm not selecting all the pips at once and then doing this. And that quite simply is I don't want to get confused about which pips go to which part of the die. So edit poly, polygon selection. Let's try it like that. That looks right. Deselect that, deselect that, deselect that. So there we have those 3. We already did the 1, the 4, and the 6. So then unwrap UVW. Open UV Editor. Going to scroll down. LSCM. Quick peel. That's our 3. I'm just going to set that right there for the moment. Now, typically speaking, whenever you're developing a texture, you want to keep everything inside this checkered pattern. However, this is just organizational at the moment, so I'm not too worried. Once again, edit poly, polygon selection. Going to box select all of that. Make sure it's all selected there. Yep. Hold down Alt, deselect that. Holding down Alt still, deselecting and deselecting. So now it's just those 5 pips. They're selected. Going to add unwrap UVW again. Open UV editor. LSCM and quick peel. That came out funny. There we go. So resetting the peel and then doing the peel again seems to have fixed it. All right. Scaling it down and moving it off to the side. Then we just have the side of 2 left to do. So edit poly, polygon selection, select all that, then deselect the extra. And there we go. So we've got that. Unwrap UVW. Open UV editor. LSCM, quick peel. Did it again. And there we go. Just now notice that they're overlapped a little bit. Definitely don't want them overlapped. There we go. So once I've got that done, I'm going to add one more edit poly. And with nothing selected, I'm going to add in unwrap UVW. And something magical is going to happen. All those steps we did, they are now all on one single thing. So now if you notice, if I have this selected right here, this circle over here turns blue. If I select this pip here, this circle turns blue. That blue line is just showing us what the outer boundaries of this particular part of the object is connected to. So if I drag this over here, I'm going to zoom in a bit. And we're going to change our scaling around. Really don't like that it's doing that. So I'm going to hit Control Z a couple of times to make sure I have that selected. And I'm going to hit Spacebar and then select Lock Selection. That should make it, nope, it still does that. Oh well. Let's position it there. Let's go to our scaling tool. Scale it down a bit. I'm just going to leave a little bit of gap between it. When we get to the actual texture portion of it, the reason I'm leaving that gap there is because if we just go up to the edge of the shape whenever we are coloring stuff in, we've got a good chance of that not having a good transfer over. So most of the time, whenever you have a seam line in your texture, you want to go ahead and texture beyond the seam line, and then it should meet up better where the two seam lines connect. Alright, so we're going to select the second one. So these tools up here, this is your move tool. If you hold down on it, you can lock it to a particular direction. Rotate tool, there's no holding down on it, everything's just rotate. Scaling tool, you can scale it side to side or up and down by selecting one of these two. And then this one is a freeform tool, which will let you do everything by clicking on these various control points. This right here will mirror the currently selected object. So it's kind of hard to tell for circle, but if I moved over to this 3 right here and then click on that, you see it flips it back and forth. So I'm going to move this back over here. And if I grab this right there, I should be able to scale it down into the circle close enough. There we go. And we are going to repeat this over and over again for each and every one of the pips. So the 6 is going to go up there. The 1's going to go there. The 4 is there. The 5 is down here. And the 3 is over here. So let's scale down first. That looks about right. Select that one. It goes to there. That goes to there. This goes over here. And this goes up here. Now, to be clear, you don't actually have to reposition all the pips inside of the pips here. I'm just doing that just because I feel like it. If you wanted, you could just leave them all in this bar right here and then color them in over there. It's not going to have a big effect on anything. Yeah. So this one right here, going to scale it down, drop it down. Scaling is still not right. And that's good enough there. Scale all these down. It's probably about right there. Nope, still too big. Right there. Yeah, that's about right. And we're just positioning all of these in here. It's a lot of repetition to this entire process. And on that note, it's a good time to point out that a lot of times you'll notice there's a lot of repetition on your modifier stack. Just remember that each time you add something to your modifier stack, that's going to be another point in the change timeline for your object as a whole, which means each time you add something to the modifier stack, you're basically giving yourself, it's kind of like a mini save point. If I needed to, I could just delete some of these modifiers here and get back to a previous point. If you're working on more complicated shapes, there's nothing wrong with having a whole bunch of edit poly modifiers, one right after the other, just to make sure you have those save reference points for going back and editing your shape in case you do something to mess stuff up. And as somebody who's spent a lot of time doing this stuff, let me just say real quick, you're probably going to do something to mess something up at some point, so better safe than sorry. And just remember, the only reason why it's selecting all the polygons in a particular pip at a time is because I have select by element selected. There's a couple little artifacts here. I'm not sure what they're to. Oh well. We'll worry about that later. So there's all of that. So this is now texture mapped. So I'm going to click, well, I don't need to save that. I'm just going to go ahead and close out of that. We got our D6 there. Actually, I don't want to close out of the UV editor just yet. From here, what I want to do is click on Tools, Render UVW Template, and what this is going to do is it's going to render out basically what we see right here. So if I click on Render UV Template, there's our image there. I'm going to save it, and let's call it D6 Map Template. And I'm going to save it as a PNG and click OK. The reason I saved it as a PNG is all of the black areas will be transparent on the image that I just made. And from there, we're going to switch gears and move over to Krita. Krita is a program that's free to use. That's a lot like Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint. It doesn't quite have all the features of the others, but it's good enough for what we're doing in here. I'm going to click on New File. Actually, instead of clicking on New File, I'm going to click on File, Open, and then if I go to my Documents folder, 3ds Max 2023, scroll down to Scenes because that's where I saved my template for some reason. Click Open. Yep. And there's my template right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my background. Actually, this is not Photoshop. I don't have to duplicate the background. I'm going to create a new layer and drag it underneath the background. So now I have this layer selected. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to be painting. So let's grab a brush or paintbrush. Let's do paintbrush first. No, brush. Okay, so what I've done was I just increased the size of the outline just a little bit, and I've selected a brush from down here, so that's going to be our basic brush. And holding down Shift, whoops, that's not what I meant to do there. While holding down Shift, I can click and drag and rescale the brush size to match the circle, and then just click once right there, and that'll create that circle right there. And then I can just go through and do that once for each of these pips. And again, just a lot of lining up and repetition. The main thing on your brush size is that it's small enough to fit inside the circle that's on the main face, but big enough to cover up the entire inside of the pip. So there's all that. So now if I click the eyeball next to background, you'll see there's just our pips on a transparent background. So I'm going to click File, I'm going to click Save As. I'm going to call that D6 Solid. I'm going to say OK. And from there, I'm going to turn that back on, turn those pips off. I'm going to create a new layer. And then I think what I want to select is Basic 2. Basic 2 gives us an opacity selector. Again, I'm going to hold down Shift and drag to make this the right size. There we go. And I'm going to drag my opacity down. Let's find out. You know what? I don't think this is the one I want. The edges and the transition's not great enough. I want a softer transition from the center to the edge. So let's grab a different brush here. That doesn't look right. And once again, I'm a little bit silly. So airbrush was all the way up at the top. This is the airbrush right here. So holding Shift, I want to drag this down to right about the size of one of our pips. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click, 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 click. And that should be good there. I don't like the size though, so let's actually make it a little bit bigger than the pip. What we're going for is that black spot right in the middle and a gradual change out from there. So now we're going to grab our selection box. I'm going to select that entire area right there. Control C, Control V. Grab our move tool, and then we can just move it right over top of that. It is just a little bit too big, but I think we'll survive. So let's just duplicate this layer. Select, deselect. Move it into place. Duplicate the layer. Move it into place. And we're going to repeat that for every single pip. And this area over here, we're not going to have to worry about, simply because that's just not even used in our final product. So whether we leave those extra pips there or not doesn't matter. So we're just right-clicking over there, duplicating the layer each time. So the reason why I want this soft fade here is because this image I'm working on now is going to be used to create our bump map. A bump map is just a simple texture that uses a black and white diffuse in order to find out how much of a divot an object should have on it. So it'll go from black to white, with white representing the most intense, while black representing the least. Hopefully I got that right and not backwards. If I've got it backwards, we can just flip the color scheme. And this takes a few minutes, just like everything else in this process. Now on the geometry die, this bump map isn't going to be used. We're just going to use the first image that we created. This one is solely for the one that we're using textures and shaders in order to create the illusion of the divots being taken out of it. And if the positioning is not perfect, we should be fine. Just try to get it as close as possible. And again, for those of you who don't have Photoshop or Clip Studio Paint, Krita is a nice and free program. And for those of you who don't know, I am a great big fan of free. That said, both Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint are great programs. Clip Studio Paint kind of has a name that doesn't sound great, but give it a shot if you've got the time. And there is all of our pips. So again, we're going to turn that off. You can see we got the pips in the location with the fade going on there. So now we're going to click File. You know what? Before we do that, we need to add one more layer down here. Make sure it's at the bottom. We're going to grab our paint bucket tool and we're going to go to white on our color selection and then just paint the entire background white. So now if we go to File, Save As, we're going to change this from solid to bump and then click Save. Probably should have paid attention to where I was saving that to. 3ds Max 2023 scenes. Okay. Not the best place to save your files to if it's just a texture, but it works. So now I'm going to go back to 3ds Max. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to close that down. And then I'm going to start adding materials to things. So first I'm going to turn this one back on. I know I put it at 0, 0, 0, but I want to go ahead and just move it to the side. Or we'll move that one to the side. Then I'm going to go to our material editor. Let's start with giving our dice materials. Go glossy paint, red sports car paint, metals, glass. I do like the way the frosted glass looks on stuff. So if I do material assigned to selection, we've got that there. And then our base color, we need to add our texture to solids right there. And with this being the frosted glass, I'm not sure this will work the way I'm hoping it will. Let's render it, see what happens. Yeah, that's definitely not doing what I was hoping for. So I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to come down here to transparency, click on that. Thinking because it's a glass I have to do that. Still not right. Alright, this will take me a moment to figure out the glass. Let's go ahead and move over to the other die. Let me select the other die. Oh, I have selection lock still turned on. That's why it wasn't letting me select it. There we go. So let's open up our material editor. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to find, first off, let's put our dark pips on there. Okay, so I made a couple of little goofs. So let's go back to this first one here. And again, we're going to change it to the frosted glass. And then we're going to come down to where it says transparency here. I'm going to click on that. And before I had OSL selected and I went down to bitmap lookup, that's not what we wanted. We want general selected and we just want bitmap. So from there we can go ahead and select, let's try this one first. Go up a couple layers. I'm going to select this die. We're going to do material assigned to selection. And then let's hit vendor real quick. And you'll see it's not doing what we want. That is because my first image had a transparency layer added to it. We didn't actually want the transparency layer on it, so I created a second image and just gave it a white background. You see if I click between the two, the alpha layer is coming out as black. So let's switch over to this one. So now that I've got that set, if I were to render this out, you'll see there's a little bit of a darkness happening where the pips are, but it's not quite as dark as I want it to be. You can already tell before it's done rendering it's not where I want it to be. So let's hit cancel on that. And then we're going to increase the transparency value. Let's just go ahead and put it at 1 and see what it looks like. There we go. So now all the pips are painted in on the inside of this die right here. I can tell I'm going to be at least moderately happy with how that comes out, so I'm going to go ahead and close that down and hit cancel there because I don't want to finish off the render. We're going to move over to this one now. So click on our second material. I'm going to come down to base colors and reflections. Click right here. Again, we want bitmap. And we're going to select D6 Solid 2. Click OK. Click Material and assign a selection. And you'll notice it looks funky because I've not actually applied the UVW map to it yet. So if I go to Modifier tab, click there, scroll all the way down here, unwrap, well, where is it? Unwrap UVW. Scroll down again, open UV Editor. I'm going to go to Mapping, Normal Mapping, and then again Box Mapping and hit OK. And because this is a chamfer box just like the other one, everything lines up just like the other one. So at the moment we've got a painted on pip on each side of that die, but I'd really like to have it have the divoted look, so let's fix that. So we're going to go up to the parent layer, so we're back up to this part of it here. I'm going to scroll down and we're going to find bump map right here. Select where it says no map, bitmap once again, and we're going to select our bump map there and click OK. Go back up, and then we're going to increase our bump map value up to, let's see what it maxes out at, 10. Let's see what this looks like. And there we go. So Not as nice as I would hope. And I think I've got the bump map going the wrong direction. Because I would think we should have shadow on this side and light on that side. So let's fix that. So going back to Krita, I'm actually going about this in a harder way than I need to. So if I click File, then I click Open, and I select my bump map here, and then click Open. I mean, again, that's my bump map. Everything's flattened to a single layer. And then if I go to Filter, and then Adjust, and then click Invert, this should work better for what we need. So File, Save As, and I'm just going to call it Bump Map 2. Click Save. OK. Come back over to 3ds Max. I'm going to change it from that image to Bump Map 2. Now let's see what it looks like. You can see a little bit of divoting happening here. Not as much as I would have hoped, but it is there. See the light reflecting off of the pips. Let's see, did I drop the... Nope, I did not drop it. Alright, so I guess that's about as good as we're going to get for the bump mapping for this one. So both of these die side by side. I'll give this a moment to render out. Now, in addition to bump mapping, there's also normal mapping and displacement mapping. We might try a displacement map. Normal mapping is a method commonly found in video games used to create the illusion of more geometry on a low poly object by just, calculating shadows and tangent space based off of the color of color of an individual pixel. And then displacement map is a lot like bump map, except that it creates a change in the geometry itself by warping it to match the new image. Hey, here's displacement right here. So let's select bump again. And if we increase our displacement, let's see what the cap is. Yikes. Definitely not right. But it is interesting to see how that works there. So this one, it looks like we want the black and white one. Then our displacement is still ridiculously high, but let's see what that looks like. And we broke it. Let's try 0.1, see if that's not so ridiculous looking. Oh, getting closer to right there. So as you can see, displacement map can work, but not really loving the results. But it does work. Additionally, we may be able to find a height map. Can't quite remember if... No, it doesn't look like it's one of the default map types for Arnold. Oh well. So if we take our displacement, put it at 0.2, click render, and then I'm probably going to call that good enough for now. This is dice, so honestly, nobody's probably going to really look really closely at the die to see how much of a divot it has. So we'll run with this. So there we have our geometry dice with pips painted in, and our texture only die. Either way is good, just really depends on what your project is.